to if I were now young.
Lord Russell, what do you think the world needs to reach a happier state?
Well, I think there are three things that are needed if the world is to adapt itself to the Industrial Revolution. The troubles we are suffering now are essentially troubles due to adapting ourselves to a new phase of human life, namely the industrial phase. And I think three things are necessary if people are to live happily in the industrial phase. One of these is world government. The second is an approximate economic equality between different parts of the world.
He's going to elaborate on that in a minute. There's a big difference between the early socialists and the modern ones. The early ones understood that mass immigration and redistribution of wealth is not a pathway to equality. It just breeds resentment. The only way you can achieve true equality among everyone on earth is through education.
And the third is a nearly stationary population. I'd like to say a little about each of those. As to world government, the world government should be, of course, a federal government, leaving a very great deal of freedom to the individual national governments.
Now, that's a true utopian ideal, and what I mean by that, it's not based in reality. As we can see from things, whether it's the UN, the World Economic Forum, or whatever, if you give people a little bit of power, they're going to want a whole lot more power. And they're not going to be geared just to stop war. They'll want to control every aspect of your life.
And only those things controlled by the world government, which are absolutely necessary for the avoidance of war. The most important and the most difficult of these is armed forces. All the important weapons of war will have to be in the hands of the international government and of it alone. When that happens, war will become practically impossible. And if war were impossible, mankind could go ahead. If war is not impossible, every advance in scientific technique means an advance in mass murder and is therefore undesirable. But if once world peace were achieved, it would be just the opposite.
Sorry to interrupt again. I'm going to be doing that a lot. His views on war are pathetic, really. I guess he's just traumatized by the war he experienced or something, and now he's just being, a bit of a punce about it. But to put it in perspective, he also says things like, we need the bubonic plague to rip through the global population once every year, and that way everyone can breed without restraint. So he's not against killing or mass death. He just has a issue with war because it puts him personally at risk, or he was scared of what happened in the bombings or whatever. It's just, he kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth on that one.
That's the first point. Now, I come on to the question of approximate economic equality. As things stand at present, Western Europe, and still more the United States of America, have a high standard of life. On the whole, the great majority of mankind live fairly comfortably from a material point of view. Asia, on the other hand, lives in very, very great poverty. So does most of Africa. And the moment people are sufficiently educated to be aware of these facts, the inevitable result is a great development of envy in the poorer parts of the world. That envy is a cause of unrest and inevitably makes world peace precarious. There's only one way of dealing with it, which is to produce approximate economic equality, which of course is a long story, but it can be done.
He does explain how he thinks that should be achieved in his book, called On Education, Especially in Early Childhood from 1926. So in that he says, equality can never be secured by legislation alone. It must be achieved by education, by teaching children habits and tastes that will make them regard each other as equals and cooperate voluntarily in common endeavours. That's perfectly true. And I also think it's very safe to say they are not doing that at all. I think the current education is all race-based politics, Marxism, basically. But I go one step further, that you can't just teach people to be equals. You need to teach people how to build a functioning society. In talking about Asia, so let's look at Asia. I mean, I was in Indonesia, when was it, last year or whatever, and I saw everyone just throws their rubbish directly on the ground and then complains that, oh, everything's filthy and they don't want to live there. I was like, well, you're the one that made it filthy. It's just ridiculous. I saw a lady walk out the front of her own store, empty the bin onto the pavement directly in front of her own shop, and then walk back inside. And I don't know, if you think that you can take that person and put them in a better economic situation and suddenly their society will be brilliant, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You need to teach them, literally, stop crapping in your own backyard. And until that's done, the rest is pointless.
The third point about population is very vital indeed. The food supply of the world tends at present to diminish through the denudation of the soil. It tends, of course, also to increase through various technical advances. But those two about balance, so that on the whole, the food produce of the world does not increase appreciably. Now that means that unless everybody is to be very poor, especially if you have economic equality, unless everybody is to be very poor, there must be not more people to be fed, not many more than there are now. And therefore you've got to get approximate economic equality, approximate equality of population, and approximately stationary population. Otherwise, those parts of the world where the population increases fast, we want to go to war with those where it increases slowly.
And that's exactly what's happening now. The parts of the world that were foolish with their reproductive habits and don't have the mentality of, oh, I can't afford to support 8 kids, so I'll just have one, they're now doing warfare against populations that were more responsible. And of course, it's not traditional warfare. It's warfare through immigration, through economic pressures, through accumulating all the land of all the businesses, of putting people from your populations in government and then controlling policies to make sure that that flood can keep coming. And the result is exactly the same as a defeat in military warfare. So there is definitely war going on right now, and it's exactly what he said. It's the people who didn't control their population committing warfare against those that did.
That brings us precisely to the problem of Asia and what part Asia will play in the immediate future.
Well, Asia, first of all, has risen to the point of education, some Asians have, where it is not prepared any longer to be subservient to the white man. It hasn't noticed that Russians are white. If it had, it would take a different line. But it seems to think that Russians are yellow or black or some other color. And I think our propaganda ought to be mainly devoted to saying only Russians also are white. I believe that would be the effective propaganda to use in Asia. But I pass that point by. Asia clearly is going to claim equality with the white man. And it's perfectly futile, absolutely futile, for the white man to resist that claim. It will infallibly win, infallibly. And we ought, therefore, to concede it graciously at once before we're driven to it. To concede complete equality to Asia. But if Asia is not to overwhelm the rest of the world with a vast flood of population and poverty, Asia must live up to its responsibilities and must learn the sort of things we have learned in the West, which is how to maintain a roughly stationary population. And if they can't learn that, which I fully believe they can learn, and learn quickly, much more quickly than most people think, if they can't learn that, they will not have won their claim to equality.
He's talking specifically about international immigration, not restriction of movement through 15-minute cities or any of the other retarded crap that modern Fabians and globalists and socialists and Marxists and all these other socialist groups think is a good idea, while at the same time rejecting the fundamentals of what makes socialism work, which is national borders being enforced and populations staying within those borders.
Lord Russell, speaking as of today, can you see the influence of any one philosopher more than any other one?
Well, I suppose in recent years the most important influence has been Marx. If you can dignify him with the name of philosopher, I should hardly like to dignify him so myself. But I suppose he must count in the list. And he certainly has had more influence than anybody else.
For those of us who reject Marx, can you offer any positive philosophy to help us toward a more hopeful future?
Well, as to that, you see, I think one of the troubles of the world has been the habit of dogmatically believing something or other. And I think all these matters are full of doubt, and the rational man will not be too sure that he's right. I think that we ought always to entertain our opinions with some measure of doubt. I shouldn't wish people dogmatically to believe any philosophy, not even mine. Not even mine. No, I think we should accept our philosophies with a measure of doubt. What I do think is this, that if a philosophy is to bring happiness, it should be inspired by kindly feeling. Now, Marx is not inspired by kindly feeling. Marx pretended that he wanted the happiness of the proletariat. What he really wanted was the unhappiness of the bourgeois.
And that's exactly what they're doing today, a different form of Marxism, except it's not the bourgeois who are targeted. It's people from every demographic who have European ancestry. They don't care about minorities. They don't care about their happiness. Their goal is the unhappiness of people who come from Europe, or their ancestors came from Europe. And if you don't believe that's the case, here's some quotes directly from the horse's mouth. I'm not going to read them out because YouTube doesn't like this stuff, obviously. But, feel free to pause and read through these.
And it was because of that negative element, because of that hate element, that his philosophy produced disaster. A philosophy which is to do good must be one inspired by kindly feeling and not by unkindly feeling.
Summing up, Lord Russell, do you feel that there is hope for the world today?
Well, I do. I feel it very strongly, but how far that is really a rational conviction and how far it's temperamental, I can't say. But I do most strongly feel that there is hope. There may be very dreadful times ahead of us. I dare say there are. But I still believe, I believe most firmly, that through whatever pain and suffering, mankind will emerge from these dreadful things and will emerge into some world that will be happier than any world that has existed in the past.
Well, that's not going to happen because modern socialists aren't good faith actors. They're malicious, they have bad intentions, and they don't actually want equality. They want power. Yeah, if you're not aware of how population increase harms the working class, strips them of all their wealth, and empowers the mega rich, check out my video on why the bubonic plague saved the working class in Europe and ended the pleb system.